Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. On a June afternoon in rural Wisconsin, a highway worker was cutting grass along the shoulder of a quiet country road when he found two suitcases lying in the tall grass. He moved them out of the path of his mower and kept working. He had no idea of knowing yet that each suitcase contained a woman's body. One victim would be identified within days. The other would remain a Jane Doe for weeks, known only by a facial reconstruction sketch that the public mocked online. Until it worked. Today, we're diving into the case of Stephen Selig, a former Wisconsin police officer known online as Mr. Handcuffs, and the two women he admitted to killing during what he described as consensual breath play. This case involves detailed descriptions of violence and the concealment of human remains. We'll walk through it carefully, sticking to what the record actually shows, including the parts of this case that even now remain unsolved. So let's start with who Stephen Selig was, before any of this became public. Stephen Mark Selig was born on October 29, 1961. According to background reporting on his career, reporting we should flag as not independently verified through personnel records. He began working in law enforcement in 1984 as a patrol officer with the Mequon Police Department in Wisconsin. In 1989, he moved to the West Allis Police Department, also as a patrol officer. He would spend more than a decade there. In 2001, that career ended. Selig resigned from the West Allis Police Department following an off-duty incident involving a handcuffed woman near his apartment. According to the same background reporting, an internal investigation found that he'd been stalking women while on duty and running an unauthorized side business selling phone service to women he'd contacted. No criminal charges were filed at the time. And so we want to be precise about what this is and isn't. This is a reported background, not a fact drawn from a personnel file or court record we've reviewed directly. The underlying internal affairs documents themselves weren't located for this account. So we can't tell you more about what the investigation found beyond those two allegations: the stalking and the side business. But if it's accurate, it describes conduct involving women, restraint, and boundary-crossing behavior more than a decade before the deaths at the center of this story. Whatever it meant, it didn't end his career through a criminal charge. It ended quietly, through a resignation. Let's move forward to 2012. Selig meets a woman named Jenny Gamis through an online contact. According to the criminal complaint against him, as quoted in a later Wisconsin Court of Appeals opinion, Selig and Gamis had connected online and then met in person. The complaint describes both of them using online S&M and bondage websites. Selig used the alias Mr. Handcuffs. Now, this detail matters because it's the same avenue through which Selig would later meet his second victim, Laura Simonson, the following year. Now, the timing of what happened to Jenny Gamis is genuinely contested in the record, and we're not going to smooth that over. Some reporting places her death in August 2012, but the criminal complaint itself, the primary legal document in this case, is a little bit more vague. It describes Selig meeting Gamis in person and her death occurring in late 2012 or early 2013. Where a court document and secondary reporting disagree like this, we're going to treat the complaint's own language as the more authoritative account, while telling you plainly what the other outlets have reported with a more specific date. But the bottom line, confirmed either way, sometime in the late 2012 to early 2013 window, Jenny Gamis died during what Selig would later describe to investigators as a breath play encounter at a hotel in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. The specific hotel has never been identified in the sources reviewed for this story. What happened next is where this case starts to become almost impossible to comprehend. According to the criminal complaint, Selig placed Gammis' body in a suitcase and transported it to his apartment in West Allis, Wisconsin. He kept it there. One account states that at one point, he stored her body in his refrigerator. He did not go to the police. He did not report a death. He kept her. The Wisconsin Court of Appeals opinion itself separately states that the second death occurred 14 months after the first. That figure doesn't resolve the disputed date we just laid out. It's simply the gap of the court's own opinion describes between the two deaths, and is consistent with either version of Gammis' death window. 14 months later, it happened again. On November 2nd, 2013, Selig and a woman named Laura Simonson checked into the Microtel Inn in Rochester, Minnesota. Hotel confirmation records confirmed this. Simonson was 37 from Farmington, Minnesota. Like Gammis, she had met Selig through an online bondage and S&M website. Sometime on November 2nd or 3rd, Laura Simonson died. The circumstances, again per the criminal complaint and the resulting investigation, were the same. A breath play encounter, choking, at the hotel. Selig checked out on the Microtel alone on November 3rd. 20 days later, on November 22nd, 2013, Laura Simonson's mother reported her missing to the Farmington Police Department. That report opened a formal missing person investigation, one that, at the time, had no known connection to a death that had already happened, unreported, a year earlier in Kenosha County. And here's the detail from that criminal complaint that turns this from a story about one bad night into something else entirely. At some point during 2013 and 2014, Selig moved Simonson's body in a suitcase and kept it in the trunk of his vehicle. He also moved Gammis' body back into a suitcase. For a period of time, both women's bodies were in the vehicle of his trunk, together. We're not going to speculate about what that meant to him. We don't have the evidence of his state of mind at that point, and we're not going to make it up. But hold on to that image, because prosecutors would later point to it directly in court as evidence of something particular about how Selig regarded what he had done. For roughly 7 months, that's where things stood. 2 women dead, 2 families, one of them actively searching, one of them not yet aware anything was wrong, because Gammis had reportedly told people she was relocating and had not been reported missing at all. Then on June 5th, 2014, a Town of Geneva Highway Department employee was mowing the grass along North Como Road. This is in Walworth County, Wisconsin. He came across 2 suitcases in the tall grass along the shoulder. He moved them out of the way so that he could keep working. They were soon found after by a passerby, drawn, according to the record, by swarms of flies. Inside were 2 bodies. According to the criminal complaint, one, the more decomposed of the 2, was partly wrapped in a plastic garbage bags with the hands bound behind the backwoods rope. The other was unclothed, with a rope wrapped around the neck and a sexual ball gag strapped to the mouth with a collar. 2 women, 2 suitcases, no identification on either. The Town of Geneva police opened an investigation into the discovery, and 5 days later, on June 10, 2014, Wisconsin authorities made contact with Rochester, Minnesota Police Department, connecting this rural Wisconsin roadside discovery to an open missing persons case nearly 100 miles away. The pieces started coming together very quickly after that. On June 12th, the Rochester Crime Scene Unit and the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension processed the room at the Microtel Inn where Selig and Simonson had stayed the previous November. Staff at the hotel had recognized Simonson from a missing persons flyer and contacted police. Investigators now had documentary evidence, the hotel's own registration records, placing Selig and Simonson there together on November 2nd, 2013, and showing Selig checking out alone the next day. On June 24th, 2014, Authorities announced they had developed physical evidence connecting Zelig to both bodies found in the suitcases, Simonson's and the second victim's, who at that point was still unidentified. Zelig was taken into custody. The exact date is one of several small details this case's own record can't fully pin down. Different outlets report June 25th, 26th, or 27th, and it's possible those dates simply reflect the difference between initial detention, formal booking, and his first court appearance, rather than a real contradiction. What's confirmed is this: he was booked into Walworth County Jail on 2 counts of hiding a corpse and held on $1 million bond. The second victim was still unidentified because Jenny Gamis has never been reported missing to this point. Her family reportedly believed she had simply relocated. There was no missing person file to check against. So Walworth County released a composite, a facial reconstruction sketch to the public. According to secondary reporting, that sketch drew criticism, even ridicule online, for its perceived quality. We can't independently verify how accurate that characterization is, but what we can tell you is what happened next. Family members recognized similar features in it. That recognition led investigators to Jenny Gamis, and her identification was confirmed through dental records by June 28th to 30th, 2014. She was reported at that press conference as 21 years old from Cottage Grove, Oregon. Now, we need to flag something here because it matters for accuracy. Gamis' age is one of the most inconsistently reported details in this entire case. 18, 19, 21, 29, all 4 numbers appear across different outlets and different years. The 21-year-old figure is the one tied most directly to the original identification announcement in June 2014. The 19-year-old figure shows up most often in later reporting, around the time of sentencing. No birth record or official document was located to settle it, so we're not even going to pretend this is resolved, because it isn't. Let's pause on what investigators actually had to work with by this point, because it's worth being clear about the difference between what different pieces of evidence could and couldn't prove. The suitcases, the rope, the garbage bags, the ball gag, and the collar. All of that was physical evidence establishing how the bodies had been transported and concealed. None of it, on its own, established how either woman died. That came only from 2 other places: what Zelig told the investigators directly, and a forensic examination. The hotel registration records out of Rochester were documentary evidence, placing Zelig and Simonson together at a specific place and time, and showing he left alone. Officials also said they were developing similar hotel records tied to Kenosha County and Gamis, though the specific hotel and the contents of those records were never made public in the sources reviewed for this story. And the online bondage and S&M websites, the digital thread running through both cases, established the method Zelig used to find and contact both women, though the full extent of his activity on those sites, and whether he contacted others the same way, was never confirmed one way or the other. What investigators didn't have is worth noting too. No surveillance footage, no cell site data, no GPS tracking shows up anywhere on the record of this case. No financial or transactional evidence ties directly to either death. Based on the sources reviewed for this account, the case against Zelig rested primarily on physical objects, documentary records, forensic identification, and ultimately, his own words to investigators. During questioning, Zelig admitted to causing both women's deaths. He described the encounters as consensual breath play and characterized both deaths as accidental. That's Zelig's own account, given to investigators, an allegation from the person facing prosecution, not an independently established fact. Captain John Sherwin of the Rochester Police Department's Investigation Division, the public spokesperson on the Minnesota side of this case, confirmed publicly that his department was investigating Zelig's activity on bondage and S&M websites. Investigators also obtained a DNA sample from him. According to the report on the case, reporting, we should note, is secondary, without a primary lab report reviewed for this story. That DNA was later matched to genetic material recovered from the ropes used to bind the victims. It's worth noting, no investigative error or misstep is identified anywhere in the sources reviewed for this account. No mistip, no mishandled evidence, nothing of that kind. What the record does show is this: for as long as this case remained open, nobody told Jenny Gamez was missing at all. Asked directly about the possibility of additional victims, the town of Geneva Police Chief Steve Hurley didn't rule it out. His answer on the record: "I think we leave that question wide open for now. No source reviewed for this story confirms that any additional victims were ever found." But no source closes that question either. It was left open in 2014, and as far as the public record shows, it has stayed open. Now let's walk through how the legal case actually unfolded, because Zelik wasn't prosecuted once. He was prosecuted 3 separate times, in 3 separate courts, for 3 separate sets of charges. First, we have Walworth County, where the suitcases were found. He was charged there with 2 counts of hiding a corpse, 1 for each victim. Second, Kenosha County, where Jenny Gamez died. In August 2014, Zelik appeared in Kenosha County Court on new charges, an escalation from the corpse hiding counts he'd already been booked on in Walworth County to a homicide prosecution built specifically around Gamez's death. He was ultimately charged with first-degree intentional homicide, using a dangerous weapon, and hiding a corpse, specific to Gamez. Then third, Olmsted County, Minnesota, where Laura Simonson died. He was charged there with first-degree premeditated murder, second-degree intentional murder, and second-degree unintentional murder. The exact date of those charges were filed isn't really confirmed in the sources reviewed for this story. What is confirmed is the outcome, which we'll get to. 3 counties, 3 sets of charges, 2 states, all of it stemming from the same 2 deaths and the same pattern each time: the body kept, not reported. Let's begin with the Kenosha County case, the Gamez homicide prosecution, because this is where the most significant pre-trial legal battle in this story played out. Prosecutors wanted to introduce what's called other acts evidence. That's details of Laura Simonson's death, used as evidence in the separate case about Jenny Gamez's death. Their argument was that the 2 cases were, in their words, inextricably intertwined, that the pattern between them showed a plan, a modus operandi, an identity, a motive, and an absence of accident. The judge in that case, Bruce Schroeder, wasn't quick to agree. He denied the motion twice. His reasoning, at least initially, was straightforward. Simonson's death happened after Gamez's, so on its face, it couldn't logically prove what Zelik intended when Gamez died. And beyond that, the judge found the evidence more prejudicial than it was worth. So twice, prosecutors went back and tried again. On a third attempt, the state succeeded. Judge Schroeder ruled the evidence admissible to show what the court described as purpose, plan, and modus operandi. And it's here that prosecutors return to that image we asked you to hold on to earlier. Both bodies kept together in the trunk of Zelik's cars for a period of months. The state pointed to that fact directly, arguing it showed Zelik regarded the bodies as what prosecutors characterized as prized possessions. And we want to be exact about what that is. It's an argument made by the prosecution in support of its position of intent and pattern, not a psychological fact established independently on that argument. and not something Zelig himself confirmed. The court didn't rule on whether that characterization was true. It ruled only that the underlying evidence, the Simonson case details, was admissible in the Gamis prosecution. Now, one note we must add here for the sourcing, because it matters for how confident we can be in everything you're hearing about this legal fight. The Wisconsin Court of Appeals opinion that documents all of this doesn't actually use the names Jenny Gamis and Laura Simonson. It refers to the victims by fictitious names, Julie Gerhard and Lisa Shepard, stated explicitly in the opinion as a way of protecting the victims' identities. The opinion itself never says which fictitious name maps to which real victim. The connection this account draws, Gerhard to Gamis and Shepard to Simonson, is based on matching circumstantial detail. The same Kenosha County case number, the same suitcase discovery in the town of Geneva, the same physical descriptions of how each body was found. This is a reasonable inference, not something the court states outright. And so we're just telling you that because it's that kind of gap that's easy to paper over, and we'd rather you know it's there. Now, that ruling, not a verdict, not a confession, just a pre-trial evidentiary decision, is what appears to have changed the direction of the case. About 3 weeks after that final ruling, Zelig pleaded guilty in Kenosha County to an amended charge: first-degree reckless homicide, using a dangerous weapon and hiding a corpse. That plea was entered around January 2016. In March 2016, Judge Schroeder sentenced him to 35 years in prison for Jenny Gamis' death. Nearly a year later, on February 3rd, 2017, Zelig pleaded guilty in Olmsted County, Minnesota, to 1 count of second-degree murder, intentional but not premeditated, for the death of Laura Simonson. Judge Pamela King sentenced him the same month to 25 years, ordered to run consecutively after his Wisconsin sentence. Then, in August 2017, the third prosecution concluded. Zelig pleaded guilty in Walworth County to both counts of hiding a corpse. On October 13th, 2017, he was sentenced to an additional 10 years. When we add it all up, the total is 70 years, 35 and 10 in Wisconsin plus 25 in Minnesota, with the Minnesota sentence specifically ordered to run consecutively, meaning it only begins after the Wisconsin time is served, not alongside it. One source additionally cites a minimum period before parole eligibility of 58 years, described in that source as a de facto life sentence given his age. That specific de facto life sentence framing is a characterization from secondary reporting, not a formal legal designation. But the arithmetic behind the 70-year total is confirmed across multiple independent outlets. Steven Zelig was in his mid-50s at the time of that final 2017 sentencing. You might expect that this is the end of the story, end of the video. However, it wasn't. In 2019 and 2020, Zelig went back into court, seeking to withdraw his guilty plea in the Kenosha County case. His claim is known as ineffective assistance of counsel. In plain terms, he argued that his own trial lawyers gave him advice that fell short of what the law requires. Advice bad enough, he said, to have changed how this case turned out. So here's what he actually alleged, according to his own post-conviction filing. He said his attorneys told him he could still appeal Judge Schroeder's other acts ruling, even after he pleaded guilty. He said that advice was wrong, and that if he'd known better, he wouldn't have pleaded guilty at all. He claimed he'd wanted to go to trial from the beginning, had rejected an earlier plea offer, and had only started seriously considering a plea after that third successful other acts motion. Now, we want to be very clear about this. Every part of that is Zelig's own account, laid out in his own filing. It's an allegation, not an established fact. To test a claim like this, Wisconsin courts hold what's called a Machner hearing. It's a hearing where the defendant's trial lawyer explains under oath what advice he actually gave and why. So a judge can weigh whether that advice fell short of the legal standard. Zelig got only part of that hearing though. His trial counsel testified that he hadn't directly told Zelig he could appeal the ruling after pleading guilty, but that he had told him he needed to assume he could not. Before the hearing could finish, before Zelig's post-conviction lawyer could finish questioning trial counsel, and before Zelig himself could testify, Judge Schroeder cut it off. He denied the motion right there, reasoning that his own earlier other acts ruling had been correct. So even bad advice about appealing it wouldn't have changed anything. In his own words, no harm, no foul. Zelig appealed that denial. On November 25, 2020, the Wisconsin Court of Appeals District 2 ruled, and the decision split into two separate findings. It's worth taking them one at a time. The first finding was about fairness of process. The Court of Appeals said Judge Schroeder was wrong to cut the hearing short, that Zelig should have been allowed to finish presenting evidence and testimony relevant to his claim. So, the appeals court reversed the denial of his motion and sent the case back down for that hearing to be completed. The second finding was about the evidence itself. The same appeals court separately upheld Judge Schroeder's original other acts ruling, the decision to let Simonson inform the Gamis prosecution case, as a proper exercise of discretion. In other words, even if Zelig eventually wins the right to withdraw his plea, the evidentiary decision that reportedly pushed him towards that plea in the first place was found not to be wrong. So two different questions, two different answers. Whether the hearing was fair to him, sent back, unresolved. Whether the evidence was properly allowed, settled, upheld. And that's where the public record, as far as this research was able to establish, runs out. No source reviewed for this story confirms what happened at the remanded hearing. No source confirms whether Zelig's Kenosha County plea was ultimately upheld, formally withdrawn, or resolved some other way. His current custody status, where he's being held, within which state's correctional system, was not independently confirmed through a direct records lookup for this story either. As far as the public reporting we could locate is concerned, this case's final chapter, in the Gamis prosecution specifically, remains open. However, that's not the only loose thread left here. There's the question Chief Hurley raised and never got an answer to, whether there were any other victims beyond Gamis and Simonson, found through the same online alias, the same pattern of contact. It was left wide open in 2014, and it's still open now. There's also Jenny Gamis's age, reported as 4 different numbers across nearly a decade of coverage, with no single document available to settle it. There's the precise date of her death, a detail the criminal complaint itself only pins down to a several-month window. And there's the DNA evidence tying Zelig to the ropes found on both victims. Reported, but never confirmed through a primary forensic document in the sources available for this story. Think too about how differently these two women's disappearances were treated, simply because of what the people around them knew. Laura Simonson had a mother who noticed she was gone and called the police within 3 weeks. That report, filed in Farmington, Minnesota on November 22, 2013, is the reason there was any missing persons file at all, for investigators to eventually connect to a rural Wisconsin roadside a year later. Jenny Gamis had no equivalent starting point. She had reportedly told people she was relocating, so nobody filed a report. There was no search underway for her at all. Only eventually, a police sketch that the public reportedly mocked online, until someone who knew her looked at it and recognized her anyway. What we do know, without any hedging, is this. Steven Selick was a police officer for roughly 17 years, before resigning under circumstances involving a handcuffed woman and an internal investigation into stalking. He met two women, Jenny Gamis and Laura Simonson, through the same kind of online contact, using the same alias. Both died during encounters he described, in his own words, to investigators, as consensual. He did not report either death. He kept both bodies, one in a suitcase in his apartment, and at one point, reportedly in his refrigerator. Both eventually together in the trunk of his car for months. In Gamis' case, for well over a year. He left them on a rural roadside where a highway worker found them while cutting grass. He was prosecuted 3 times in 3 courts in 2 states. He pleaded guilty each time, and then in 2020, 4 years after his first sentencing, an appeals court found that he had been denied the full evidentiary hearing required to test his claim that his Kenosha County plea should be withdrawn, while in that same ruling, upholding as proper the underlying evidentiary decision that, by his own later account, had made this position feel impossible to fight. 2 women went missing from their own lives. One reported, one not. Both were found, eventually, in the same stretch of grass. Both suitcases left there by Selick's own admission, by the same man. What happens next in the courtroom that started this, whether that plea falls or stands, or it gets resolved some other way entirely, is, as far as the public record shows, still an open question. If this case stuck with you, let us know in the comments. And if you want to see more cases like this one, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one.